What's up, guys? We're watching Fight Feed. Today, I'm going to be breaking down the upcoming UFC Fight Night card that is happening in Brazil on October 11th. This fight card is decent. It's bringing back Mr. Charles Oliveira, which we all are huge fan favorites of. How can you not be a massive fan of Charles Oliveira? And then also Mateusz Gamrot, who's a beast in his own right. And this is actually the main event. Several other really fun fights happening on this card. I do think Oliveira is coming back a bit too soon, guys, after that flatline KO that occurred in June. But regardless, we'll go through the entire card. I'll give you my takes on each fight. What I'm going to do in this video, guys, is a little bit different than my previous ones that I've done for fight predictions. I'm just going to give you guys kind of like the lay of the land, really. I'm not going to dive into all the nitty-gritty details. I want to make this one a little bit of a shorter version just to see how you guys enjoy it. Obviously, I have all of the information here on the screen that you can pause as you go through if you'd like. That way you can see some of the different stats and things I pulled together. But what I'm going to really just kind of go through is obviously introduce each fighter, and then provide some high-level details that I think are important to think about, and then give you guys the reasoning behind my pick. So before I dive in, just want to say thank you guys for watching and coming to Fight Feed. If you can make sure to give this video a like if you enjoy, and also hype the video up if you're feeling so kind today. Without further ado, and please subscribe if you haven't already. Now we can dive into my predictions for UFC Fight Night that's happening in Brazil on October 11th. All right, guys, so the first fight on the card, we've got Saimon Oliveira versus Luan Lacerda. Both these guys are pretty similar. Actually, both of them are on a couple fight losing streak. Saimon Oliveira has a little bit more of a losing streak here in 3 losses compared to that of 2 on the side of Lacerda. One major call out, though, is also on the side of Lacerda. He's going to be about 3 inches taller, 2 years younger, which I think is negligible. But Oliveira is going to have the reach advantage in this fight ever so slightly by half an inch. Now, looking at the records, obviously both these guys, have lost a few fights. I am going to be going Saimon Oliveira in this fight, guys. The reason that I'm going Saimon Oliveira, there's a couple things that I factored into this pick, right? When we look at Saimon Oliveira's wins, not only does he have just a plethora more of fights, like he has 24 professional fights out of 15 on the side of Lacerda, but he also has wins in every category you can imagine. He has 5 KOs. He's got 11 submissions, 2 decisions. That, to me, was a telltale sign kind of just going through the stats, because when you look at Lacerda, he's got 0 KOs, which is honestly shocking when you consider the level of these UFC fighters. Knowing that he has 0 KOs from a stat perspective, when I look at his way of winning this fight, obviously a KO is not completely out of the question, but statistically speaking, he hasn't gotten one before, and he's a submission artist through and through, only a couple decisions. So why I feel like Lacerda is still a threat, obviously he's a very good submission artist. So this fight really could boil down to who's the better grappler, who's the better submission artist. But the fact that Saimon Oliveira has those other tools to get knockouts makes me lean his way. But in addition to that, when we look at Lacerda, he has not fought since 2023, whereas at the very least, Oliveira has actually fought in 2025, making him the rightful choice from my perspective, even though he did lose pretty badly in his last outing. I just think that he has more activity, he has more professional fights, he has more ways to win, and I'm picking Saimon Oliveira for this one. The next fight on the card, we've got Valter Walker versus Mohammed Usman. So lots of fun stuff happening here, guys. When we take a look at Valter Walker, he's going to be, a lot taller than that of Mohammed Usman at 6'6" compared to the 6'2". The reach advantage from Mohammed Usman, only half an inch, so a bit negligible there. And when I look at both these guys' styles, I think that Mohammed Usman, having not only just being Kamaru's brother, but having a bit of a background and an ability to stop other offensive wrestling that his opponents might bring, there is that threat from him where he can maybe keep it standing and just win based off of strikes. But in my opinion, guys, you gotta go Valter Walker in this one. He's the hometown guy coming, fighting in Brazil. He's only lost once in his entire career. Shocking that he's lost to Brzeski, but that is besides the point. When I look at Valter Walker, the one thing that really shocked me the most, guys, is based on his last few performances, it would be almost easy to assume this guy is a straight submission artist, but he actually has more knockouts on his record than he does submissions. Obviously, we've seen that he has a very tricky way of going about latching up his heel hooks and doing it with almost no space and in a very fast approach or way that he's able to just grab the heel from his opponents. I mean, even in his last fight when he beat Njechuku, I could not have seen it going the exact way that it did. Obviously, I saw the heel hook being potentially there, but the way that he latched it up was actually pretty shocking. So in my opinion, guys, I think Valter Walker has that opportunity to latch that sub up and finish Mohammed Usman in this. I think he's probably likely to win this by sub. If not, like I said, if you're like a real believer in Mohammed Usman, he does have a way of like grinding out decision wins over guys. And so I do think that he has that opportunity here if he's able to keep it on the feet. He does have decent striking, so that could be something that is in his toolbox that maybe Valter Walker's not able to overpower him in. But I don't know that I see Mohammed Usman completely nullifying that heel hook threat or even the takedown threat that Valter Walker might have. It seems as though, like from a statistical standpoint, Valter Walker has that submission skill that Mohammed Usman does not seem to have. And I think that he's also scrappy enough on the feet to where Mohammed Usman might have success, but won't be able to overpower it. But that's just, that's my assumption. We will see what happens on the night of. I'm going Valter Walker. The next fight on the card, we've got Jafel Filho versus Clayton Carpenter. Clayton Carpenter fighting out of Phoenix, Arizona. So shout out. That's where I'm, not from, but that's where I live. So shout out to Clayton Carpenter. Now, Jafel Filho is going to be the Brazilian hometown hero in this matchup. Guys, I am going Clayton Carpenter in this one. The reason I'm going Clayton Carpenter, when you go back, if you rewatch his fight with Ulanbekov, in my opinion, I think that he rightfully should have, maybe won that fight. Even if he didn't win, I think it should have been a closer on the scorecards than it was. I feel like Ulanbekov really, in that fight, was losing in a lot of those exchanges on the feet. And I think he ultimately just ended up getting Clayton Carpenter down and holding him there is kind of how I remember it. So don't roast me completely. But even when I go back and like look at it, I just think Clayton Carpenter is and was in that fight the better fighter. And I think that he has shown some really solid skills in his career thus far. Although he does have a very minimal amount of fights. I really like the fact that he's fighting out of MMA Lab. He's a younger guy at 29. He's actually I think he's 3 days younger than me. Literally 3 days younger. He's a Gemini, so shout out to Clayton Carpenter. I think his birthday was like June 9th or something. And mine's June 6th. So we're both 29. So maybe I'm just a little bit biased, guys. But I really like Clayton Carpenter in this fight. I think that he is able to mix things up very well. I think that his showing against Ulanbekov proved that he is very good, right? And I think that in this fight, he has a few different options. Now, Jafel Filho is no easy night at the office, especially when you consider the fact that he has quite a few finishes across the board, right? He's got 5 wins by KO. I think that says 10 out of 16 by sub. So he is a finisher. And that, now I'm feeling like shit. What the hell? I don't know. I actually don't know, guys. When I look at this again, 2-2 UFC beat Ode Osborne. Yeah, I mean, I've already locked in Clayton Carpenter, guys, but Jafel Filho, I can see him being a heavy favorite. I'm sure he is. And as you guys know, if you watch my channel, I never look at the odds prior to filming these, but I am thinking that Clayton Carpenter might be a dog here. But he's got a win over Chairez, a win over Rocha. Rocha was 17-1 when he fought him. That tells me he's been in there with those guys that are not only just skilled, but have very good records, right? And have wins in the UFC, and he's been able to get things done. I just think that Clayton Carpenter has a very solid game. Like he has a very solid game on the feet. You obviously see some of that like Muay Thai inspired striking and that kind of comes out of some of the MMA lab fighters. But then also very good showing on the ground. I know Ulanbekov was able to control him there, but that is going up against a guy who's grappled his entire life. And I think Clayton Carpenter still showed he was scrappy enough on the ground. Definitely very solid off his back too. Was able to mount a lot of damage from the back position. So I like the opportunity for him here to potentially upset a more skilled, or I guess not more skilled, but a more experienced fighter on paper in Jafel Filho. So I'm going Clayton Carpenter. The next fight, guys, we got Irina Alekseeva versus Beatriz Mesquita. So Beatriz is a debutante, right? So not too much on her. And, you know, from a debutante perspective, she's also not in like a super cushy position here in terms of like, she's not like a much younger than her opponent. She's actually smaller too. So I think we're going to see a bit of a size advantage there on the side of Irina Alekseeva. But I have to go with the hometown hero in Beatriz Mesquita. She's fighting, you know, out of Brazil. This is going to be her hometown fight. Now, guys, this could backfire terribly, right? Because we've seen fighters not be able to make it on the night of in terms of that pressure, right? Like they get out there, they're in their hometown. But now when you add in not only getting out there in her hometown, but being a debuting fighter in the UFC, when you consider all of those sorts of things, there's a chance Irina Alekseeva is able to stop takedowns and stop that grappling pressure that Beatriz is going to bring. And maybe Alekseeva gets it done. But guys, I have to go with Beatriz here because I think Beatriz has those skills that are going to really go against the grain of what Irina Alekseeva is trying to do in the fight. Irina Alekseeva is going to try to keep it standing, I believe. And in her last outing, and even the fight before that, what we saw was Irina Alekseeva get taken down and kind of just mauled or controlled and just not able to keep the fight where she wants it. Whereas and then also I think the other interesting thing is when Irina Alekseeva tried to take down Saigula in her last fight, Saigula not only was winning in a lot of those exchanges on the feet, Alekseeva had some strikes that she landed on Saigula, but Saigula ends up actually taking her down and controlling her on the ground. And so all of that said, I just feel like you have this person in Beatriz coming in whose her only loss in her career was a DQ. And outside of that, or I'm sorry, not only loss, she has no losses. One of her wins was by DQ. My apologies. But Beatriz, I think, is going to have that grappling pressure. We see 3 out of her 5 wins by sub. Look, now Irina has 8 professional fights. Beatriz has 5. There's really not a crazy difference there, in my opinion, where I don't think Irina is going to bring like such a crazy amount of experience. Now, the one thing that she does have, though, she has fought some higher level female fighters in the UFC that Beatriz has not fought. So, like I said, guys, I don't know where the lines are on this one, but if you are someone looking at an underdog, and if perhaps Irina Alekseeva is the underdog, which is very likely to happen, I think that she could be a good underdog to bet on, just because as I kind of go through it here, it seems to me that there is a lot of things weighing on the side of Beatriz, but I think Beatriz just has that grappling pressure and then that submission threat that I don't think Irina Alekseeva will be able to nullify, is my opinion, but we shall see on the night of. All right, guys, we got another fight between some women here. Julia Polastri versus Karolina Kowalkiewicz. And sorry if her name's cut off. It's just ever so slightly cut off there. But guys, I'm going Julia Polastri. Now, although Julia Polastri did lose a pretty close fight to Luque, or as we like to joke, Poopy Go Diniz, I think that Polastri really impressed me in that fight. Although she lost, she impressed me quite a bit. She was a dog through and through. She stayed in there, was swinging for the fences even as the fight went on. And I think a lot of people felt in that fight, if there was one way that she was going to lose, was Godinez just kind of out cardioing and out striking for the entirety of the fight. what we actually saw was Godinez outstriking for some of the fight, and Polastri almost getting better as the fight went on, especially when we look at that third round where she really was laying it on Luque. But we did find out that Luque, she had to use the bathroom, unfortunately. And so maybe that changed things a little bit. But when I look at this fight, guys, I just don't think that Kowalkiewicz is going to be able to overpower in the grappling department, especially when you consider, although she's an inch taller, has a 1 inch reach advantage, I just think that her age at 39 is not going to be putting her in the best position to take over and control the younger, obviously very solid fighter in Julia Polastri. She has that dog in her. And I just think that dog is going to come out on Saturday, especially being the hometown hero. And I just think Polastri also has really solid strikes, really good hands. I think that she could catch Karolina, hurt her pretty badly on the feet, maybe drop her. I don't know if this goes all the way to a decision, but statistically speaking, it's likely, right? When we see that Karolina has got 75% of her wins that way. So if things end up going the way of Karolina, it's likely to be a decision, but I am picking Julia Polastri. I think Julia Polastri by decision. That's what I think. The next fight on the card, we got Vitor Petrino versus Thomas Petersen. So this is actually a fun fight. Thomas Petersen, in the heavyweight division, he's had some of those weird fights. Like I don't know. There's like a selection of heavyweights in the UFC heavyweight division that are just prone to going to decision, right? Like Thomas Petersen, Mohammed Usman, Hamdi Al-Adela Wahab. There's a couple of those guys that you're almost just inclined to get a decision against, right? But Thomas Petersen had some good showings. I didn't pick him in his last fight, which was a very stupid pick on my part. I should have picked Thomas Petersen. I just thought that he had gotten knocked out by Gaziv pretty badly and then didn't have much time off between his next matchup. And Dontel Mays still has, he's still heavyweight, big guy, has a chance, but Thomas Petersen just out controlled and just used his game plan perfectly to beat Dontel Mays. Now, Vitor Petrino, guys, this dude was really someone I thought was next up in light heavyweight that was going to kind of rise his way into the rankings. Now, things didn't go his way. His only two losses were in that light heavyweight division. He lost to Anthony Smith is definitely, questionable given where Smith was at that point in his career. But Anthony Smith's still a very good high-level black belt who's able to latch up that guillotine and choke his ass out. Jacoby just ended up knocking Vitor out. And I think that was a war of attrition. And then obviously just the damage caught on and Jacoby was able to find that clean shot. Jacoby still, and a lot of people forget this. People forget, man. He was a very high-level kickboxer. He had a lot of fights in kickboxing. Obviously, notably was KO'd by Alex Pereira in Glory back in the day. So, he's definitely was in there and has been in there with guys that are very high-level strikers. So, it's not a huge surprise for him to catch someone with a solid right hand. And that's what we saw in that loss for Petrino. But outside of that, guys, Petrino, I mean, dude, the guy looks like a brick shithouse, right? At heavyweight, he looks like a completely different human being. He looks extremely strong. And I just think from a build standpoint, he's also still going to be taller by an inch. He's going to have a very sizable reach advantage here. And also, I think when you consider the fact that he has been kind of really showing off his ground chops, I just don't see Thomas Petersen really being able to completely wet blanket Vitor Petrino, given Vitor Petrino having his own set of skills in the grappling department. We saw him take Austin Lane down and choke him out. So, he definitely has those skills that I think are going to nullify the game of Thomas Petersen. And I see Vitor Petrino actually getting a sub off on Thomas Petersen. Although Thomas Petersen's never been subbed, I can see it happening in this one. But he also still has that power in his hands that people forget about. He did knock out a couple of guys on his come up, especially in Contender Series and then a couple of his fights in the UFC. I see Vitor Petrino just having the better bag of skills, and I see him likely getting Thomas Petersen, whether it be Thomas Petersen shooting a takedown, trying to get to side control and control him from there. Vitor Petrino shrimping out, maybe getting something in the full guard, or even reversing that position, getting on top, maybe landing some ground and pound and getting the back and rear naked choke. There's all kinds of different opportunities here, I think, that Vitor Petrino can have. I think that he'll ultimately get the win by sub. Not exactly sure how he gets there, but I think it happens in his favor. Next fight, we've got Lucas Rocha versus Stuart Nickel. So I had Lucas Rocha for now, guys. I'm just gonna go with Lucas Rocha. I've been kind of leaning on these Brazilian hometown heroes. Now, when I look at Lucas Rocha, he did lose to Clayton Carpenter, but guys, as you saw, I still do rate Clayton Carpenter very high. I think that, obviously he's had experience. Both these guys have been out for a bit now, but Lucas Rocha's come back, or he fought a little bit later in 2024 than Stuart Nickel. I just think that when I look at Lucas Rocha, I look at the fact that not only is he 5 years younger, which I don't think is going to play a huge advantage for him. He does have a decent size advantage. He's 2 inches shorter, 1.5 inch shorter in reach. But I think the thing that really gets me going here is that this guy has a very solid finishing rate. When you look at it, what is that? 59 and 24, 60 and 20 is like fucking 80 something %, right? So Lucas Rocha has all these ways that he's finished fights. And same thing on the side of Stuart Nickel. He's, I think that looks like he's got an 88% finishing rate. So these guys are finishers through and through. And Stuart Nickel could very well go out there and get a win. But I think Lucas Rocha, when I look at the fact that he's got more fights, he's also won by KO quite a bit in his career, 10 of his 17. I just think that he has so many opportunities here to nullify the game of Stuart Nickel. And I just see him being able to, even if it doesn't go to a finish, I can just see him being able to just outmatch Stuart Nickel altogether in this fight and go to a decision. But from a finishing perspective, I think it could happen either way, whether it be a KO or sub. I really can't decide which I would run with, but I definitely think the fact that Stuart Nickel's lost by sub before means Lucas Rocha has a chance there as well. But like I said, Stuart Nickel could very well also land some heavy shots and put Lucas Rocha out on his end. So hard to say, right? Like this one, it was a little bit more difficult, as you can see that I was still kind of on the fence of who I was going with, but I got to go with Lucas Rocha on this one. I think that he'll get it done. Next fight, we got Vicente Luque versus Joel Alvarez. Guys, Vicente Luque was one of the best fighters, and like in my viewing of the UFC these last 6 years, Vicente Luque was like a guy that I really rated highly, especially when he choked out Michael Chiesa a few years back. I was like so shocked by that because I'm like, this is the only way that Vicente wins is by KO. Like I didn't think that he'd be able to sub like Michael Chiesa, but he did it. Guys, that Vicente Luque, although only 33 years old, he has a different type of mileage on his MMA gas tank, okay? Or not, I don't even know if you would say for the gas tank, but I would say on his MMA odometer, I guess is the right way to put it. I'm not a car guy, so apologies. But I think when you consider all those fights he's had, he is at this point in his career, guys, where he just does not look like the same guy that I used to be a huge fan of and watch. Still a big fan of Vicente Luque, always will be. But Joel Alvarez is a fucking beast, guys. Like this dude, he is brutal. And this is one that surprised me when I was breaking these things down, to see that Joel Alvarez has so many wins by sub and only 5 of his 22 wins by KO. Like obviously we get a bit recency bias with MMA, right? But when I look at like his recent fights, I just remember him being so heavy-handed, crispy on the feet, solid combinations, and just dropping and hurting his opponents. Obviously he did lose Arman Sarukian, but he's only got a few losses in his career thus far. He is so big too, 6'3", a 77-inch reach. Now, although he's going up to 170, we don't necessarily know how well that frame will size up or pair with 170 guys, especially those that are, tried and true 170ers. But the fact that he's 6'3", like he's already kind of at the upper echelon in terms of height in that division. I don't think there's maybe one other guy that's like 6'4", but I think a lot, like Kevin Holland is like 6'3", I think he's listed as. So he's not going to be, he's up there with the tallest guys, basically, is what I'm trying to say. I think Joel Alvarez finishes this fight. I think he hurts Vicente Luque badly on the feet. I can see him then either getting a win off some ground and pound, or I can even see him getting a sub. But like I said, Vicente Luque still has those skills. He showed us against Garimbo that he's not just a fish out of water, especially if it gets into a grappling situation early on before some strikes are landed. But Joel Alvarez doesn't seem to be the type of guy where he's just going straight for a sub. Like, he is going to want to put some hands on the dude and hurt him first. And I feel like he'll only go for that sub really when he's got him in a compromised position. But we'll see what happens, guys. I think Joel Alvarez gets this W, in my opinion. Next fight, we got Ricardo Ramos versus Con Offley. I am going Ricardo Ramos in this one, guys. I think Con Offley is a fun fighter. He was on Ultimate Fighter and showed some great skills there. But I just think that when I looked at and broke down things, you got Ricardo Ramos is not only a taller guy, but he's got a significant reach advantage at 6 inches. Also a better overall record and 14 UFC fights under his belt. Also has been in there with guys who are very skilled in the UFC. Now, when we look at, the way he's lost, of course, that is a bit worrisome for me. He's kind of lost every way you can and not just like once, whereas Con Offley's only got 1 KO loss. But when I consider the fact, you fought Chepe Mariscal, who's a beast. Jourdain's a beast. Julian Rosa, a beast. He has not been consistent in Ricardo Ramos, but I just think that Ricardo Ramos has so much more experience under his belt. He's fighting in Brazil, which is his hometown. Both these guys are pretty active, but Con Offley's got 2 losses now. He has a lot of pressure to get back out there and get a win. I just think that Ricardo Ramos is likely to get a W here. I think that he can win this in several different ways. It's hard for me to imagine on this one which way it goes for him. But I would say if I were to pick, I think that this likely goes to decision. Ricardo Ramos wins that way. Next fight, we got Lucas Almeida versus Michael Oswell. So I am leaning Lucas Almeida, guys, but Michael Oswell is coming out of that 4-ounce fight club. We know and have seen some very solid fighters coming out of there. Obviously, Josh Van, notably, but another guy from their camp just won recently too. Is pretty big underdog, and he was able to get it done. I just think Lucas Almeida, when I look at this, has other ways to win, right? Like, he has the submission, he has the KO. Whereas when I look at Michael Oswell, he's got 0 wins by sub. So it's like, for him, the only option in this fight, in my opinion, is getting those strikes off and getting a win by KO. And I just don't know if he'll find that KO on Lucas Almeida, considering he's only lost once by KO in his career, but also he has those opportunities to mix things up on the feet. He has a significant size advantage, a significant reach advantage. I think when you kind of pair all those things up, and not even just that, 5 fights in the UFC to 1 on the side of Michael Oswell, I got to go with Lucas Almeida getting the dub. Next fight on the card, we got Jhonata Diniz versus Mario Pinto, guys. Look, this is a hard one to pick because Jhonata Diniz has 4 fights in the UFC. He's definitely experienced, definitely has a solid frame. He's a big guy. Had a fun fight against Alvin Hines, who I was even more impressed with in that fight, really, because although Diniz definitely won the fight, in my opinion, Alvin Hines came in on short notice and gave Diniz a solid fight, right? Like, he didn't just blow him out of the water, right? And so I think Diniz is a very solid fighter, but Pinto not only is going to be 7 years younger here, he's a bit taller at 6'5", smaller reach by half an inch, which is not much to talk about. But I think when you look at the power that Pinto has in his hands, he hasn't lost. He's got that confidence. I just think he has that type of power where it really could change the course of the fight. Like, even if this goes to like a take him down, drag him out type fight, which Diniz is not necessarily a guy who's always, going for that. But I think if Diniz is kind of keeping himself on the outside and just trying to land shots from the outside, he could bring this to the later rounds and maybe even be winning on the scorecards. But Pinto has that type of power where if he catches you, he could put your lights out. And he also doesn't have as much damage in his career thus far. I just think that Pinto is riding that 10-fight win streak. He's going to want to continue that. And I'm thinking he can get the W here. But Jhonata Diniz is no easy night at the office, as we can tell just looking at his record. I can see a lot of people picking Diniz based on that, but I'm picking Pinto. I'm kind of riding the wave here. thinking that Pinto can continue to build off the momentum that he has, especially getting that huge KO over Austin Lane back in March. So I am going with Mario Pinto to get the W. You know what? I'll say he gets it by KO. We'll see if that happens. I don't know. Next fight, we got Deiveson Figueiredo versus Mateusz Jackson. Deiveson Figueiredo, one of the flyweight greats, a legend of the sport. Mateusz Jackson riding lots of momentum on a 6-fight win streak, has looked unbeatable in his fights. Was able to even give Daniel Marcos his first loss in his professional career. And then obviously he flatline KO'd Blackshear, who really has gone on to have some solid performances himself, right? Like he's now, he did lose a Davey Grant, but he had a win or two before that. Ultimately, guys, I would pick Figueiredo, but I just think in this matchup, it is not a good matchup for him, in my opinion, from a sizing perspective. The age is negligible. I think, obviously Mateusz Jackson's still in his prime. Davison's probably, on the tail end of his. And then also, the Sandhagen fight where Figueiredo really, I thought that he tore his ACL or something. I'm a bit worried for him to come back early here. And ultimately, my opinion is that Mateusz Jackson gets this win. I could see him winning by KO, but I also can see him kind of just outstriking and winning by decision. But I think I'm going to lean KO on this one, guys. But you cannot count Figgy out, guys, because Figgy's a legend. Figgy has every opportunity to potentially even hurt Jackson, get him down, choke him out. He has all of those skills that most fighters don't have. I just think Mateusz Jackson has proven to be just such a tricky guy to go up against, and especially when you consider the fact he hasn't lost in 5 years. I think Mateusz Jackson's got this one. All right, and our final fight of the night, guys, we got Charles Oliveira, Charles do Bronx, and I'm sorry, guys, I don't know why this is cut off a little bit, but guys, I love Charles do Bronx as much as the next person, but I have to say, I am going to be going Mateusz Gamrot on this one, and it's solely based on just obviously Charles, guys, in this fight, where Charles wins this fight, in my opinion. I don't see a sub on the side of Charles because I think Mateusz is just too scrappy with his grappling. He's very good himself. But where I see Charles winning this fight is using that Muay Thai style he has, where you can land those knees up the middle, maybe land some shit to the head, land some elbows, and maybe getting a KO over Mateusz Gamrot. That is really where I see Charles having success in this fight. My issue is that Charles was flatline KO'd worse than he's ever been in his career back in June, which we're really not far away from whatsoever. But then also he was traveling on October, the first week of October, for Contender Series. And that is very worrisome for me when you have a huge fight in your hometown, right? And that's kind of what I'm basing myself off of, is that although Charles is so skilled, it's I just don't think his brains had enough time to cover from that flatline KO. And Mateusz Gamrot is not a KO artist by any means, but he does have hands. I mean, we did see him in the Dan Hooker fight getting hurt quite a bit. He was also tagging Dan Hooker quite a bit. Dan Hooker didn't leave that fight, completely scratchless. So the way I look at this, guys, is Mateusz Gamrot just implements that game plan that he always does, where it's nonstop pressure, gets those takedowns, maybe gets latched up in a couple subs by Charles, but I just see Mateusz owning the fight from a control perspective and taking it to decision. I don't see him KOing Charles by any means. I also don't see him subbing Charles. So the way I look at it is it's Mateusz fighting off those subs from Charles, fighting off any of those strikes or those clinch exchanges, and just ultimately taking Charles down, controlling him, and beating him with the pressure, especially knowing, Charles obviously had that bad loss against Ilya, and then he's traveling pretty soon and before this fight. Also that Charles was training for Fiziev for quite some time. He's going to have to switch game plans completely. I just think that this is actually lining up in the side of Mateusz Gamrot. But guys, you can never count out the legend in do Bronx. I can see do Bronx definitely getting a win as well. So I think that if you're looking that way, you're not far off. But I just think when I consider some of those other factors of, the fight being changed, Mateusz Gamrot having a certain style, I think Gamrot is able to implement that game plan and ultimately get the W on Saturday night. But that's what makes the sport so fun. We all get to find out what's going to happen. And as we all know, we really never know. Let's look back at what happened with Pereira and Ankalaev, right? So very excited to see how this one plays out. I would love to hear from you guys on who you're picking. So make sure you comment below. Give this video a like if you enjoy. Subscribe to Fight Feed so you can stay on top of all the new content that I'll be posting. And guys, I will see